Hello, everybody. This is Alan Brochstein from 420 Investor, and I have with me today Zoe Russell from RAMP, Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. How's it going, Zoe?
It's going very well. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here. I bet our audience doesn't know this necessarily, but we have two native Texans to talk about what's going on with cannabis legalization in Texas. And before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Zoe?
Sure. Myself, I got involved in politics around 2007, and a lot of it had to do with thinking that the government didn't really respond to the voters in terms of the market collapsing and bailing out the banks and bailing out the auto dealers, and that made me just a very small government-minded kind of person. And I've been politically involved since then in the Republican Party, especially since 2012, becoming a delegate and whatnot, and participating in different clubs and Republican groups and young Republican groups and women Republicans and whatnot. And it's just been on since there. It's kind of like an addiction, so I'd call myself a political junkie.
Well, I met you, I think it was in August for the first time at a really cool event. It was sponsored by Houston Normal, and I think I remember telling you I was really impressed by your counterparts, one from the Libertarian Party and one from the Democratic Party as well. But the whole point of the evening was really that cannabis legalization goes across all the parties. And I think what I said to you at the time was you have the hardest job being outreaching to the Republicans. But I guess you were already part of RAMP at that time. Can you tell us about Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition and their history and their mission?
Sure. RAMP was formed in 2012 by Bob and Ann Lee, and Bob has since passed away at the age of 90, and Ann has survived Bob. She is 85, and they founded it in 2012 after Ann was speaking on a panel at a national NORML convention, and on the panel of 5, I think 3 other people, three people including herself, were Republicans, or maybe 4. And so she thought, this is against all of the values of the Republican Party. Marijuana prohibition is against the values of the Republican Party of small government, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberty. And so Bob came up with the moniker of RAMP, and it's kind of modeled off of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And it was Ann and Bob in Harris County Republican circles with their brochure talking about their son and their support for this policy change. And Harris County is where Houston is, for people who don't know. And everybody, I mean, when you're around politics that long, everybody in politics knows you. So they carried the brand of RAMP very far before myself and some other young people got involved. And I came in January 2014, and our political director as well, John Balcom, he's actually the president of Houston Young Republicans. And we just thought, this is something that it's low-hanging fruit in terms of policy, and marijuana is not my end-all, be-all, it's not my #1 issue, but it's achievable, and it's a huge impact on our state and on our young people. So we just thought, this is something we really need to run with, and right now in the GOP, maybe people are just embarrassed to say that this is their issue too, so we want to be that vehicle where people don't have to be embarrassed, where they're backed up and supported by an organization.
Well, that's just awesome. And you mentioned Ann and Bob Lee and their son, but you didn't name their son, and I bet a lot of people listening to this know who this guy is because they've heard of Oaksterdam. But can you tell us a little bit about Richard and his story and what that meant to his parents?
Yes, and actually, so Richard's going to be in Houston, and we're going to have him speak on June 25th. It's a Thursday night, 7 p.m., and I'm pretty sure the venue is Paul's Kitchen for that. And so Richard Lee is amazing. He's from Houston, and he's one of 5 sons of Ann and Bob's. And I can't remember if he's not the youngest. So he in 1990 had a workplace injury that left him in a wheelchair as a paraplegic. And while he was in the hospital, he was researching what could help him with muscle spasticity and came across research about marijuana. And he tried it, and it helps also with his nerve pain. And so he told his mom and dad, marijuana is my medicine. And that was a total change for both of them because they believed every single line that the government had told them. And but they believed them and they supported him. And Richard went on to create the first hemp store in Houston. He co-founded Houston Normal and hemp clothing store. And then eventually when California legalized medical marijuana, when the vote passed in 95, he moved to California. And he has long been an entrepreneur in the marijuana industry with the growing cooperatives. And then he visited Amsterdam and saw what their trade, industry group was like and how they did have best practices and, people teaching one another about various aspects of the business industry. And so he brought that concept back to the U.S. and formed Oaksterdam University in Oakland, California. And the city there absolutely loves him. He's been able to revitalize part of Oakland that had been run down and made it into sort of a little Amsterdam in Oakland. So Richard, Oaksterdam has taught thousands of people about how to run your business successfully above board, within the law, and how to serve your customers with absolute best product. And this is the kind of man that our federal government wants to raid. So he's actually suffered through raids by Obama's DEA. I think there's multiple raids. I know about one raid, and he's since divested himself of the business, but he is a professor there, and he's still teaching there. And Richard is just one of the most modest people you can ever meet. And that's another reason why we're so happy to come on board with RAMP, because Ann's established it in Republican circles, and Ann has also established it in marijuana circles, where there's a new group every single day. So the fact that people already knew who Ann was and had respect for RAMP helped us, grow and form alliances with other really powerful groups on this issue set.
What a great story, and he's certainly an industry legend. But and his story obviously is the kind of story that I bet resonates with your targeted audience. But there's so many stories like that, right?
Well, yeah, and so I told Ann, she really needs to tell people about Richard, and that is what turned her mind, because it's so true that these personal stories have to come across. And if you meet Richard, he's just this really nice person, and to think that he is a criminal is anathema. So it's important for lawmakers to see the real faces that are impacted by their laws, because it's just that nameless, faceless bureaucracy kind of thing that I can't stand, where you can't get any logic through this just massive bureaucracy for them to see that it's real people that are impacted.
Right. Well, let's get into the meat of our subject today, which is to talk about what's going on in Texas. And just to frame it a little bit, I think that there were a lot of people don't necessarily understand this because they're used to people actually having the right to vote in states. But in Texas, it's our legislature that makes all these decisions. We don't have that right, for better or for worse. And so our legislature meets every 2 years. And there were 3 different areas, and we'll go over each of them. But I know that there were goals for decriminalization, goals for medical marijuana, and goals for legal cannabis. And just as a little bit of background, we're going to cover all these areas, but shockingly, we had, I think his name's David Simpson, kind of a Tea Party Republican, if I'm not mistaken, come out for full legalization. It's grow it like a tomato kind of language, and nobody thought that was going to pass, and of course it didn't. And I think there was some hope that we'd get a little bit better medical marijuana outcome. I know you expressed the other day a much more favorable view of that, and I'll let you talk about that in a minute. But
sure.
The medical marijuana bill that passed low or no THC bill or high CBD bill, which did pass, which is historic. But to me, the most disappointing part was the decriminalization part. We got nothing. And so let's start with decriminalization, and we'll run through those three areas, and I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So, yeah, so right now in Texas, just a backgrounder, if you have 0 to 2 ounces, you can be, I mean, it's a Class B misdemeanor. In every instance, the cop's supposed to arrest you, book you into jail, and you can face up to 6 months in jail as a punishment and or up to $2,000 in fines. And that's not including, obviously, the cost, you know, the fines that you pay, fees that you pay for probation, the fees that you pay for classes. You get your driver's license suspended for 6 months and up to a year if you're under 21, I want to say. And so it's just a horrible policy as it stands today in Texas. So what we were trying
But isn't that
to
just the beginning, Zoe? All those things you said are true, but it's more than that, right? I mean, it's a permanent scar, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, you never live it down, and that's the kind of crazy thing about these criminal records is they don't sunset, you know, like you can never live this down.
Yep.
And so much of it is reliant on getting good information after you get arrested and not pleading guilty, not signing the form. And so many people can't afford bail, and they sit, I mean, would you sit in jail for 30 days to wait for your trial, or would you just sign a form and walk out of there with a conviction at 18, 19 years old? So that's what's going on. So what we're trying to do is stop people from getting arrested would be a huge thing, and then also stop people from getting a permanent criminal record. So there's two components to that, because in Texas we don't have a statewide civil penalty. That's common in a lot of other states, but Texas just has the A, B, and C misdemeanors. So like a C misdemeanor is a speeding ticket. And we were pushing for, so with a C misdemeanor, you can still get arrested unless you write it in the law that you specifically cannot get arrested for that, which is true for speeding tickets and open containers. So that could have been an option to write that in the law. But with the civil penalty bill, HB 507, it would have meant that there is no criminal conviction whatsoever. You can't, not only can you not be arrested, but we're not going to have a record of this. It's just a fine that you pay. And if you can't even afford the fine, up to $250, then you show up to the judge and you tell them you're indigent, and they have you do 10 hours of community service or take some kind of a class, treatment class. And so then you just get to walk away, and we don't waste all these law enforcement resources on putting people in jail.
Sure.
So, yeah, it was a real shame that something like this didn't pass. And I had a lot of confidence in something like this making it to the floor. I think that the civil penalty concept, with it being so new in Texas, was probably like one of the biggest hurdles. So when we come back next session, we'll probably push for the same bill because, I mean, why not? You want to get the best bill that you possibly can through, and that's a huge goal of RAMP, is to get people not arrested and no longer criminally convicted for the small amounts of marijuana.
And so your angle on this, obviously civil rights in general, and that's not necessarily a big Republican angle, but small government, the cost of this justice system, but there's more to it than that, I think, right? How is it that you go out to your Republican constituency and get them on board with this?
Well, the policy doesn't work. If you look at other states that have a civil penalty or don't arrest for marijuana, they don't have like skyrocketing high marijuana usage rates. They have equivalent usage rates to Texas. So you can just add up the full cost. There's a fiscal cost. I mean, there's a time cost. We're using our resources for something that's not that important. And there's a huge human cost. I think that Republicans can absolutely understand the argument that it hurts our economy when you give a bunch of people a criminal record for no reason. It hurts their productivity. So those two things, add them together, and what do we get? No benefit over any other state that's not doing it. So that's my major argument. And the problem is, the real problem is that you can try and bring as much logic as you want into that building, but there's always a political component to their decision. And that's the other thing we're trying to tackle, is getting more Republicans vocally supportive of this change, the grassroots Republicans.
Okay, let's go to medical, because there was kind of a small success. I guess you're more optimistic, as I said, after listening to you the other night. But let's talk about that briefly, and what just happened in Texas there.
Right. So in Texas, we have this bill that's pretty popular in conservative states, is the non-psychoactive cannabidiol oil for intractable epilepsy only. And the way that some other states have done this is the possession of the oil within the state is decriminalized. So you still have to break a federal offense to transport the oil over state lines, and you have to figure out some way to do it, and the government is not asking you how you did that, but you can possess it in the state. But the thing about Texas's bill is it allows dispensaries to grow the marijuana and dispense it in the state. So I think that our bill is a little bit better. It sets up that kind of functioning system of licensing dispensaries, which obviously we don't have right now. So, like, bureaucratically speaking, it gets us partway there to a functioning medical marijuana program. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm supportive of it. The other reason I support it is that it started that education process about the plant of marijuana, the fact that research has been impeded by the federal government, the fact that it's so much safer compared to other prescription pharmaceuticals. That conversation has already been had with every single legislative office now because of this bill, and so it's just that's one step on the path to us opening the door so they're understanding that the whole that all the components of marijuana and all the different strains, all of it can potentially have medical benefit, and why are we limiting this incredibly safe plant from medical use? So that's why I'm supportive. I definitely have some concerns about the functionality of the bill, but we worked really hard to try and make the bill functional, and when you hit a certain point where the changes are just not going to be agreed upon by the office that's authoring it, then that's, you make your call, do I still want to support this bill? And for several reasons we did. So that's kind of where RAMP stands on that.
Okay, so that's a good perspective. I kind of have a mixed view myself. I don't ever want one of these programs to be the be-all and end-all, but I like your interpretation. This was a step in the right direction, and at the end of the day, if one patient is helped, if just a single patient, then it's worth it. So
exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. So even if it's tiny, so one of the concerns I had early on was who's going to invest in this? Who's going to come in? At first, it was written that it had to be a nonprofit company, and I'm just okay, for the vertical integration that they're requiring the company to do, and then they say it has to be nonprofit, that makes no sense. No one's going to come in and invest for this small number of patients. So that's when I got Pat Moran from Texas Cannabis Industry Association to help me understand, from an industry perspective, how many patients would you want to have this market. And from a lot of industry people, they see this as, an eventuality, we will have medical marijuana in Texas, so they're willing to invest at a loss for a certain amount of time, right? I mean, some of them are, and some of them have business models where it can expand and contract based off of a very small number of patients. So after I understood that, I thought, and then they did change the wording so that it doesn't have to be a not-for-profit, it could be a for-profit. So they did change that in the bill. They substituted that language. So there are things that we really tried to work on to make this as functional as possible, and we didn't get everything. But that change and my understanding that, okay, this oil will be produced. That is, I'm just I can't wait for the day when people are using marijuana oil for intractable epilepsy in Texas. It's going to be fantastic for these kids.
Okay, well, that's
hopefully. The THC amount could raise, obviously. We know that that's being done in Colorado, higher THC amounts. But.
Yep. So, and then on the legal front, unfortunately we don't have a lot to talk about there, but do you have any comments about just what just happened on the legal front?
It's actually pretty huge. So Representative Simpson, yes, you're right. He's a Tea Party guy, and it's really cool that he came up with this bill because, you know, it gets the media talking. I mean, it's a huge media story. It was a national media story.
For sure.
So that's always great. You know, it gets, like, I mean, people, I'm at it's the Texas Young Republican Federation board meeting today that I'm going to go into right after I end this call with you. And there's people in from California, you know, young Republicans in from California, Alabama, and they'd seen the news about Texas marijuana stuff. You know, so it's always good to have the news-making kind of stories. And also, it got out of committee. Like, that's actually a very huge step. The fact that it got a hearing at all was a big step. Then the fact that it got held for a vote was a big step. Then the fact that it got voted out of committee 5-2 was a huge step. And Chairman Todd Hunter voted for it. He's the chairman of Calendar's committee. He's a very powerful guy, and he's out of Corpus Christi, so maybe he kind of understands the border issue. And Representative Simpson, I think, was working in for a long time to get this vote. So he's not Tea Party. I mean, he is a mainstream Republican. So we got his vote on a bill to end marijuana prohibition in Texas. So, like, all of these things, like all of these relationship forming, and the fact that, like, we'll see what happens with his vote and see if it hinders him at all or helps him. You need, like, people to take some kind of step out there, and then if you can show nobody got politically hurt by that step that they took, then it's a lot more comforting for people who want to take that step, you know, in next session.
Got it. So your sell's going to be easier in a couple of years if these guys get reelected and it's not an issue.
Yes. And let's say, if Representative Simpson is, like, easily maintains the seat and gets reelected, or, you know, wins by a landslide, doesn't. I mean, he might catch a primary opponent because of this. You can't be sure. So at the same time, like, our goals for the future are to train people on becoming campaign volunteers, phone bankers, and block walkers, because we want to, instead of really opposing people in the legislature, we don't have a war chest to go out and start, you know, spending millions opposing people on campaigns and propping people up, new people, but we do have bodies that can go out and show support through volunteering and get, you know, more people on our side, seeing, like, okay, these people are going to show up when I need them during campaign season, to be there, you know, and I know that they're going to be there next session and the session after that, or season after that, helping me if I'm, you know, looking out for their issue set. You know, these are my constituents and they really care about these issues. So that's what we want to do, to sort of earn friends.
Right. So I know that Marijuana Policy Project had kind of an official timeline, and the legalization timeline was 2019. So the fact that we made a little bit of progress this year on that front and the seeds are planted, sounds like we're on track there. Is that your time frame also?
Yeah, you know, I'm really hopeful for medical marijuana in 2017, and I think that was what MPP had said. And
right.
And I am also, you know, really, I mean, we're not going anywhere. We want 2019 to be the year as well. And yeah, incremental change is how it happens here in Texas. Texas is a huge state, so people making giant changes like that, like, they don't do it lightly. So we have a lot of work to get there in 2019, and I think so much of it depends on the whole country's kind of temperature on the topic. And
right.
Like, I mean, as a bunch of states legalize between now and then, you know, we're going to be talking about, it's going to be a whole different world in 2019.
That's an excellent point. Nevada and California could be legal at the time. It could, their voters could have voted to legalize by the time that next session in 2017 hits in Texas.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of, you know, what y'all will be doing over the next couple of years to continue the progress that was just made?
We're looking at the presidential campaign, and we just want to follow the presidential campaign closely and see, you know, if we can get statements from campaigns or whatnot. some feedback, or try and like hold their feet to the fire on some of this marijuana stuff and see if we can make it matter in the primary process in the GOP. And obviously, you know, Rand Paul is the guy who's the furthest out there. But
Right.
Marco Rubio, like, refuses to answer the question whether or not he's smoked. And, I mean...
Who cares about if they smoked? It's what they'll do. That's
exactly.
what I care about.
Yeah, I know.
We know what Chris Christie will do.
Yeah, exactly. So Chris Christie is really, really, really bad on this policy. So
as if people didn't have enough reasons to hate the guy, right?
Yeah, I know. It's funny in Texas because he doesn't even come up as like a reality. Like in our Texas GOP circles, like nobody talks about Chris Christie.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, there's different personalities and GOPs in every state, obviously, but yeah. Chris Christie, like, man, I don't know. He's done a lot of good on just running his own campaign into the ground, I guess. But yeah, that's what we want to do, is see if we can, see what Rick Perry would say about it. I mean, he's been out front on marijuana stuff. So we want to see if we can get these campaigns to kind of to give us the time of day and give us some information on where they stand and press them on it a little bit, because it's, I mean, right now marijuana is Schedule I federally. Why? You know, can anybody justify that?
No, but I just got an idea. If you can get Rick Perry to substitute cannabis for whatever it was he was on in that last presidential debate, and then if he does better in the next debate, if he lasts that long, then there might be a story there.
Yeah, I know. Man, poor Rick Perry. Yeah, he really kind of screwed up. But he's been working hard. I think he's been working really hard to kind of get in shape for this run. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. There's just so many candidates. So I think there's just going to be a flood because people are like, oh, they're all, you know, tying one another up. So.
Well, I know you're more into the political stuff than I am, but it's my understanding that Rick Perry is very anti-cannabis. Is that not right?
He is, so there's a group in Texas called the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and they have a subgroup called Right on Crime, and they are awesome. They push a lot of criminal justice reform within the GOP, kind of showing, like, on a results-based argument, like the results just aren't here to justify the spending, and you know, like, for example, the Harris County Jail is the largest mental health institute in the state. Why are we putting our mental health people through jail system? So they do a lot of criminal justice reform, and Rick Perry is big with TPPF, Texas Public Policy Foundation. So I think that he is more nuanced. But Right on Crime as a group, they don't take on marijuana that strongly, I think, because it's also controversial. So that's like one of the things that RAMP wants to do, is make marijuana just yet another boring criminal justice topic that the boring wonks can all kind of argue over the nitty-gritty, and it shouldn't be seen. It should, this whole emotional response, we need to kind of tamp that down as much as possible, because it only hurts us.
That makes sense. So just so our listeners understand, RAMP obviously started in Texas, and you and I were talking about this briefly before we started. For people who are listening that might be inspired by what you guys are doing, why don't you tell everybody kind of how it's working in the rest of the country with respect to RAMP and what you want people to do?
So what I've been doing is trying to figure out this game in Texas, so that we can come up with some sort of a model that we export our ideas to other states. So we've got some people that have emailed in wanting to form state chapters, and we're at the point where we have this program that we can kind of export. Here's how we did it in Texas. Here's what was successful and not successful, and here's how you can kind of repeat without reinventing the wheel. And like you said, Texas is not a ballot initiative state, so ours is like very legislature focused, so I need to work it a little bit for the ballot initiative stuff. But on the ballot initiative side, it's really just about educating and trying to get your message into GOP circles. So we're formulating presentations to give that are like Republican focused for medical marijuana, decrim, and full legalization, so that people can go out and use the RAMP presentation and give speeches to whatever groups, Rotary clubs or Republican women's groups. So we basically, we don't have a whole lot of capacity to run chapters in other states, but we are looking to launch chapters that want to kind of look at what we did in Texas and run with it themselves under the brand of RAMP. So that's kind of, and we want to support them with our website and our social media and any way that we can kind of do an umbrella around the entire brand of RAMP.
Got it. So any Republicans listening, or anybody that's maybe not affiliated but just wants to take that on, I think, like I said that first time I met you, that if we're going to make progress, it's really, that's where it's going to come from for the most part. We already know the libertarians support everything, decriminalization, medical marijuana, legalization. Most Democrats, I mean, the polling shows, but really where there's, I'm not saying that, and I think you talked about this on that summary you did the other night, it's not a good use of time to go out and argue with people, but there's this huge middle ground that this is not an issue for them, and so an organization like RAMP can really help educate a lot of those people that are, this is not really their issue, and I think you guys can help bring them into our camp.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be everybody's main priority. We want to kind of tap the people that are already politically active and just add it to their issue set, because it's almost, you know, it's almost like the people that come in, it's kind of ridiculous, but the people that come in talking solely about marijuana, they're brushed off, they're brushed to the side, they're, you know, their voices,
the stigma and the
like
stereotypes.
Yeah, and it's so annoying. Like I've heard that some of these marijuana activists have literally been told, you're not the right constituent.
Right.
So it's, I mean, so like it's a shame that the way that politics works is you need to be an ally, and so we are, you know, I go to these clubs and I befriend people, and I don't necessarily talk about marijuana right away, but when I see them at another function and I really, really need their help, that's when I'll approach them and ask them about marijuana, and they already know me. So that's kind of how, like, that's my way. I'm a kill it with kindness kind of person, and that's just the way that I try and win people over. And so for the activists, like, they can't come around just during session. They need to be involved with their community and their political community all the time, all the time. So they need to be going to their own, you know, Republican events and whatnot. And the funny thing is, you know, what people can do, and I said this on the call, is go to, if you're in Texas or whatever, well, if you're in Texas, Texas Tribune and Health District, whatever your number is, and see what the last election results were. Because if you're in a totally red district, then you should be involved with the Republican Party. I mean, at least going to some of these functions, campaign stops and whatnot, because you're not going to split them in the general. Like, these districts are just set to be Republican and Democrat to a large degree. So it's important to know, you know, like, the reality of your own district.
Sure. Where to invest your time, right? So besides opening, or, you know, helping you guys expand RAMP into other states, for those that might be listening, what else can people do to help support your cause?
Well, we always take donations. Donations would be great. So the one thing that we're looking to do is potentially hire a lobbyist for the 2017 session. So that takes, you know, funding. And another potential that we have is forming a PAC to give campaign donations. That would be an interesting, you know, a very valuable use of money. And then donation, we also use them for print materials and merchandise. So donations would be great. And the other way that people can really help us is just to get on our newsletter with your full address. And this is true for anyone across the country, because then we can put you specifically in your district, and when anything is going on with your state rep or your state senator where we need an action item, we will have a direct email to you about your state senator and information about them specifically, so that it's all laid out what you need to do, what we need help with.
That's great.
So, yeah,
Yep.
so that's a huge thing. It's just getting people's address information.
Isn't technology
We do that
amazing?
on our homepage.
They make it so
Yes.
easy. I mean, I click and the letter pops up. It has my name, my address, everything, and then I can send it. But I don't know if it gits read. That's the problem. But I'm sure you have a view on that.
Well, every call matters. I mean, every constituent hit into an office, you should definitely, contact your own rep and your own state senator, and don't just limit it to that. Contact your sheriff, your chief of police, your mayor, your city council members, and just get the conversation started. Because, a lot about this conversation is let's not even talk about it because it's controversial, and let's just do the same old thing we've always been doing with no questioning of how it's going.
Okay, and then one last question, kind of a personal question. I know you're about to go to law school. Are you going to still be in the same position with RAMP yourself, or do you have to?
I'm planning on it, and the good thing is Texas, like you said, is every other year. So this will be the down year. So I'm really going to shift as much of the work to our political director as possible during campaign. It's going to be the whole campaign and everything. So for my entire first school year, I'm going to turn to John Balcom to run, what RAMP's doing, because it'll pretty much be totally campaign focused.
Got it. Well, hey, Zoe, thank you so much. I'm really impressed by not only RAMP, but you in particular, the energy that you show and the message and the way that you convey that message. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share this update on Texas with everybody.
Oh, thanks, Alan. I appreciate you, too, and your being involved and bringing, people don't, we met also at the Marijuana Investment Conference, and I heard there that Archiview is the fifth largest hedge fund in the world, surrounding any topic, so people just don't realize that level, that caliber. I mean, probably people listening to this do, but people on the outside don't realize the caliber of the business people that are interested in this market and how it's not a scary thing, and we should be totally open to big business and totally open to investors in general and entrepreneurs getting into this. It's great. We're taking it over from a black market, which was horrible and violent and rampant criminals, and it's becoming you people, so it's fabulous.
I'm with you. It's something that benefits obviously entrepreneurs, but more importantly, patients. Patients are going to have better access, better quality, and it benefits society because fewer people in jail, better health, all sorts of potential reasons. So, all right. Well, this has been great. I hope to talk to you before law school starts, but if not, good luck with that, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. You have a good one.